Hey, good afternoon. This is Pete Bussum bringing you today's episode of MSP Initiative Live Sessions. I'm joined by the team at Infrascale here, which we haven't had on in quite some time. So it's kind of really cool to be able to chat with these guys. But before we get going, what I want to do is just make sure a couple housekeeping items. And let's see, I'm going to share my screen real quick. And for those of you that know us, you know that the MSP Initiative provides a lot of good community and things out in the community. Our next block party, we just finished one down at DattoCon, which was really amazing. There was a pirate ship and all kinds of things at the Hard Rock Hotel and Hard Rock Cafe, not the hotel. But it was really good. It was down at DattoCon as an after party. And the next one here revolves in Orlando, right around the ConnectWise. It is the 8th of November. It will be in Icon Park. And we still have up this year's, but we're going to change this promo. We've got a 90s super band coming this year. Last year we had All American Rejects. This year we're going to have a 90s super band. And we announced it at the DattoCon party, but it's Sugar Ray, Better Than Ezra, and Tonic. So it should be a real good mix in there. But you can go and you can learn more. You can see who our sponsors are. You can click to sign up. We encourage everybody that's going to be in the Orlando area around IT Nation to click, join, and do it. It certainly gets you registered and into the party a lot quicker, right? But you get out there, you mix with your peers, you mix with your partners, and obviously you can see there's a lot of sponsors here. We're adding more every day. So come out and do it. These sessions are live every Tuesday and Thursday. So just keep coming back. We also publicize out here in our sessions what and who is coming up. So you can see the recordings are also put out and on. So we will look forward to having you join us on one of these sessions or whatever. But now I'd like to say hello to Aaron and Andrew from Infrascale. Hey guys, thanks for joining us today. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for the invite, Pete.
Yeah, great. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, good. Glad you guys are here. So let's take a quick couple minutes, kind of like, who is Infrascale and what do you guys, where do you guys play in the channel, and what levels and what makes for your solution to work for the providers that might be listening in.
Andrew, you want to cover that one?
Yeah, sure. So Infrascale, we're fundamentally a backup and disaster recovery provider. We have a pretty broad range of solutions across our portfolio, covering cloud backup, which is traditional endpoint backup, cloud application backup, covering software as a service, pretty broad range of services that we can now offer backup for. And we also have a disaster recovery solution that has a pretty wide range of deployment scenarios, anything from just being able to handle a simple machine failure all the way to offsite data, offsite boot and run for long-term disaster type situations. The other big area people, of course, use our backup software for, it's not just for the sake of having backup, it's to protect them against various natural and cyber threats that really face every business these days. Recently, the CEO and I were at a cybersecurity summit in Charlotte, opening briefings from an FBI agent, and it's like slide number 3 is, look, ransomware isn't a bunch of kids in the basement anymore. It's a business model, right? And you need to start, everybody needs to start thinking about that, not just, the enterprises like, MGM who were recently hacked, but also, mom and pops, small to medium businesses, manufacturing companies, local governments, school districts, everybody.
It's interesting you bring that up with ransomware and backup. I was watching on LinkedIn this morning, Katie Arrington. I don't know if you know Katie or know of Katie, ex-DOD, really led CMMC coming in and things of that nature. But she was talking in a live about how we are at war now, right? It's no longer where people are going out just trying to make money. It's a cyber war, and nations are looking to disrupt not only from a physical perspective, but they're working on the ransomware or finding DDoS attacks and other things to disrupt the supply chains, which can ultimately cripple different economies. So we've got a whole new level of warfare, and certainly that's out there. So, what's your guys' role? Are you guys enterprise, SMB, both? Where do you play?
I think we mainly play into the SMB and SME sectors. I've been recently spending a lot of time with our customers, sort of canvassing our roadmap and talking to them about, who they're serving and what they're serving. And I mean, it's really interesting. One of the big things we're seeing, and our clients have been feedback to us about, is the sheer diversity of their own clients. Right? Some of the, we've got these challenges of kind of offering these solutions, like I spoke about, like a full-on peer-to-peer, FedRAMP certified, restricted personnel type solution that might be needed from a criminal justice perspective and public safety, so police or emergency services for local government. Same time, we've got, I spoke to one guy, he's like, look, some of my clients, they're all in hospitality. I don't know if you know the ownership structure of hospitality, but that Hilton you recently stayed at, right? It's not owned by Hilton, and the staff aren't from Hilton, right? And so those guys, as the owner or the operator or the brand changes, then the IT changes, and who operates the IT is changing. Some of these guys are running on 30-day contracts, right? How do you get someone up and running on a 30-day contract, and how do you like look after them from that? A bunch of them have one server. What does that look like from a resiliency perspective, right? How do you service someone like that? And then at the other end of the market in the SME and kind of mid-enterprise space, where they may be regulated, they may have to touch on HIPAA, they may have to touch on to other regulations that are industry specific. Those guys might have 2 data centers connected by a piece of fiber, right? So they're like, oh yeah, we can deploy a totally different solution. And that client diversity is a real challenge for them, because you're really stuck with when I worked in the enterprise sector, what we used to call your mess for less, right? You've got this fully deployed landscape that you need to support, and you can't necessarily standardize, either because of client diversity commitments, client size commitments, and client risk tolerance. Even with this war that's kind of going on, and I think there's a genuine war aspect of it on the one hand, and I think on the other side, it's back to the business model, right? People have realized that banditry. I just finished watching 1883 last night with my wife.
Oh,
Very
great
tragic.
series. Great series.
But in the middle of that, you just realize the Oregon Trail, what a dangerous place it was. And it wasn't just, from the game that I'm used to playing as a recently minted American rather than one who was born here. It wasn't just people dying of dysentery. They were being hit by bandits. And the bandits, that was a business model for them. Like, they were the regular bunch of people coming along. You would just steal their stuff, and that's how you made your living. And increasingly, that's what we're seeing in the cyberspace. And they're not interested in discriminating anymore. They're not like, the nation state actors, they've got particular agendas. They want to be in particular places. They can execute supply chain attacks in, increasingly sophisticated ways. And if you look at some of the, research from Mandiant and some of these other big cyber consultancies, the amount of effort they're willing to invest on a single attack is huge. But the other side of the market, there's just if that's a rifle, then on the other side, you've got this kind of shotgun carpet bombing approach to the whole problem, where it's like, look, you just hit a big enough area. It's like spam used to be, right? Hit a big enough area, then you get enough of a response rate that dealing with it, dealing with the fact that you're only getting 1 or 2%, that's a decent yield.
Right. So it's interesting, Andrew, you brought up a point, and I think we think of backup traditionally as restoration, or even in the case of ransomware, where you may be having the ransomware backed up, but it's a snapshot in time where it wasn't released yet, so you can go and eradicate and recover. But I heard something in there that kind of piqued my interest. What role does a backup company like an Infrascale play with the authorities? Like, how does that go? Because I think a lot of times nobody really talks about that. How does your solution, or how does a backup and recovery solution fit with the authorities? Like, what do they do?
Well, I mean, if you look at somebody like law enforcement, like it's literally going to be their first question is, do you have a backup, right? Because
Mhm.
they're overwhelmed. The cyber response centers, either at the state or the national level, they're unable to respond to, to stuff that isn't nation state level or isn't national security level, right? They certainly want you reporting it, right? That's really important. That was another thing the agent brought up at the cyber summit, because they need to start keeping track of that, and for them, driving awareness is critical, right? And some of these attacks against smaller businesses may be being used as starting points to either kick off other ransomware campaigns, to they use the web pages as landing points for more sophisticated attacks, right? They're kind of establishing a beachhead in the way. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things that's basically when I go to a cyber insurance seminar, when I go to a security one, they're always talking about a few key things that you need to have to operate a business in the 21st century, right? And that is some level of email security. Now, I mean, the great thing is a lot of folks are moving over to M365, which out of the box gives them a ton more stuff than you would have when you were operating your own mail server or operating your own exchange, right? They want you to have multi-factor authentication. And they want you to have phishing awareness, because the fact is it's actually much easier to just get someone to do something dumb than it is for you to do something smart, right? It's a natural part of human nature. And then if all of those three things fail, and there are just hundreds of pieces of software and the tiniest little failure modes, or there's a new thing called bring your own compromised driver, right? When they're starting to attack things, right? They'll install a signed driver that they happen to know is compromised in order to facilitate another attack. So with all those things in place, right, it's much less of a, hey, assume I can kind of protect myself from the outside. I can have this 1990s, early 2000, what we used to call, the spiky outside, the soft middle, right? You need to have protection everywhere. And you need to assume that at some point you're going to be breached. So now it becomes more about limiting, like the sort of the bulkhead model within a ship, right? You just assume that something's going to make a hole in the ship. And what you need is a way to make that not be the whole ship sinking. Right. And part of that is just internal security measures, but a big part of that is making sure that you have your data elsewhere. And that data is protected really in a different way than the primary copy of the data. So that means either having separate devices, or separate physical infrastructure, having it offsite, potentially air gapping it, having multiple copies in different ways. It's great that you can put it all in the cloud, but fact is, pulling a terabyte back from the cloud, you're limited by the speed of light and the speed of Google, and that's not going to be quick. So you need this diverse approach. And backup and recovery, it's not the sexiest thing, frankly, right? Everybody wants to be like, oh, we're going to do AI and we're just going to catch all this stuff, and then the AIs are going to start battling each other, and now we have Cybernet. There are just those really basic things that I spoke about, particularly MFA and backups. They're turning up in business insurance surveys now, right? The insurers are less likely to want to take you on if you haven't put in, MFA is not difficult to deploy anymore, and backup and recovery, I mean, you really should have had that already, right? And then really it comes down to the client's risk tolerance, and providing them with a solution that kind of matches that risk tolerance. And, one of the things we have, and we're really working on diversifying at Infrascale, is being able to provide a solution at any kind of price point, right? All the way up to the, hey, we want this boot in the cloud, 15-minute RTO, all the way down to, look, we're a little more mom and pop. If we're down for the afternoon, we're comfortable with it, but we do want to get our data back, right? It's our client database, or this, everybody has privacy concerns, even though there's no real legislation in the United States right now about privacy. No one wants to be, just from a moral perspective, wants to be the person who got everybody's phone number or personal details, or socials, or worse, out onto the internet, or card details, anything like that. Everybody wants to look after their customers, because their customers are their livelihood.
So that's interesting where you bring that up, and key point there for I always look is, if you didn't have backup by now, where have you been, right? You should have. But how are the technologies changing to combat this current, the whole environment is just changing, not just from a cloud perspective and, keeping away bad actors and, things that are going and, but where is the technology? What's shaping the technology right now? Where is it going? What's next?
I think there are a couple of big trends, right? One is storage is getting cheaper and cheaper, right? Like you just look at the cost of a hard drive and you look at the cost of a solid state drive. And the costs are just, Moore's law, I think we've kind of left behind, but no one was smart enough to attach their name to the law that hard drives get cheaper. So we don't have a name for it, but storage are getting cheaper and cheaper. And this has two implications. One is it does mean that your backups are getting cheaper and cheaper to store. But what we're finding is because storage is cheaper, folks are just storing a great deal more data, right? There are more endpoints. Each endpoint has more data on it, and you get these big multiples, right? So with storage getting cheaper, it is, I think, easier to justify backups, but it's kind of almost like a zero-sum area where the client's own storage use is outpacing or keeping pace with that, right? With much cheaper storage, it means, particularly in the cloud, there are now some interesting offerings that are now available to everybody versus only available in enterprise. And a lot of that's around storage tiering, right? So with easy access to multiple storage tiers, particularly on the colder side, it's now outpacing that how much data the client is using. And a lot of these storage tiers are specifically designed particularly for backup scenarios and to an extent for disaster recovery scenarios. And a lot of what we work on in our labs is around building interesting technologies that take advantage of that storage tiering and again allow us to offer, make offerings at different price performance points, and have different cost structures in terms of what we're paying monthly versus what you might end up paying, were you to be either the victim of a cyber attack or were something to happen to your hardware or your premises. So I think there's a lot of interesting things there. And I think from a pure engineering point, the really interesting thing about working with the cloud is you've got a level of predictability and testing around your costs that was more difficult to have maybe 10 years ago, when you really weren't sure quite how much of what you were going to use. So you ended up over provisioning. And that's helped us drive down the cost of, it's not just the cost of storage, all that storage has computes supporting it, is to better measure that cost of compute and to be able to better offer a service to customers. And then I think the last thing, and cloud plays into this, but it varies, is bring your own storage, right? Customers often have, they're looking at it and going, well, why am I paying, for this hosted storage when I've got all this spare storage of my own? Now, as long as it is, able to be air gapped or at least physically separated from their primary storage, or it's ideally in another location, with an independent power supply, independent networking, then it is quite suitable to be used for backups, right? Those kinds of things are starting to come into play. And there's still some very interesting things going on in the virtual world. I'm interested to see actually what happens with this whole VMware Broadcom acquisition and how that drives things. If there's a real potential there for Broadcom to totally change the pricing model, and that even a model change, let's not even necessarily say that anyone's price actually changes, just the model change might be enough to really start pushing people in new and interesting directions, either going a little bit more back to physical by saying, yeah, look, my estate's not that big that I'm getting the benefit of the virtualization, or yeah, you know what, with the price change and my upcoming hardware refresh, this is a really great time to look at, say, moving to Azure, which is honestly the dominant platform from the various interviews that we've been discussing. It's the dominant platform for customers of MSPs.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I often say, at what point does the cloud break and people start moving back to premise and things of that nature? Because technology is a cycle. There's going to be.
It is. I remember when I was in university, this is quite a while ago, and I can make a shout out to my professor, Chris McDonald at the University of Western Australia, but he talked very much about that cycle, right? As storage and compute and networking costs and speeds vary, you just end up, it's a sort of a cycle or a sine wave, depending on it. But you vary between compute that is someone else's computer, for which the current word is cloud, or
Okay.
SaaS, right? Now, SaaS is a little different from cloud, I think, but you're doing it yourself and doing it on someone else's hardware.
Mhm.
And I think we're, particularly now with the way networking is, right, which is actually getting better and better in the last mile, really, than it has ever been. The networking within the data center, I think the acceleration is kind of stalled a little bit, frankly, right? We're 100 gigabit Ethernet, and it's only slightly faster than some of the generations we've had before. But now we're really talking about, gigabit to the home or gigabit to the business, where, that's so much faster than we even had internally, maybe a decade.
Right.
So those kind of trends are playing into it. But I think ultimately it's going to be a hybrid solution. Right. I can, if you think about some of the other trends, secular trends affecting businesses, they're going to look at cloud, and sometimes cloud's kind of expensive, right? There's definitely a niche, or not even a niche. There's a pretty chunky area of workloads, which I call high value, low infrastructure, where putting them in the cloud totally makes sense. You never have to deal with a hardware refresh cycle anymore. Everything's software defined. A lot of the work we have to do for our own data center, like we maintain a map of our data center. That takes effort. It doesn't deliver direct value to our customers. With our cloud-based solutions, we don't have to maintain that. You just go to the console, you can see everything that's yours. And of course, the cloud provider has a strong incentive for that to be accurate, because they want to bill someone for it. Mm-hmm. So, the software-defined aspect of the cloud, I think, is super interesting. But everybody's got some workload or other that, be it video editing, or be it a manufacturing workload that needs to be physically located near the equipment that it's supervising for computer-aided manufacturing. For CAD, those workstations, you got 30 monitors attached and who knows what else, right? They all want to be local. From my own personal experience, right? I travel a lot for work, frequently internationally, of frequent flyer on I don't know how many planes. And every time I look at a laptop, I'm like, this time it's going to be in the cloud. And then I look at the cost of like the fanciest MacBook Pro, which is basically way more than I need. And then I look at the cost of sort of something vaguely similar in the cloud, and every time I end up buying a MacBook Pro, because it's always with me for the time that I'm operating it, and it's a little inconvenient. So the great thing about the new M2s is you can bang around with a rocket ship of a 13-inch laptop in your backpack, and it's not heavy. And with remote work, again, like the cloud does have some advantages there, right? Obviously, everything's plugged into Google's global network, or Amazon's, or Microsoft's, and these things are second to none. No one really wants to have to like VPN into the office to get stuff done, but a lot of those services are now SaaS, Microsoft 365, SharePoint, and you whatever ERP or line of business type application, they're picking that up SaaS, and then the rest of their workloads are either mobile endpoints, increasingly mobile endpoints, or they've got something that's an on-premise solution, and shifting it to the cloud. There's still risks in the networking, right? People can put a backhoe to just about anything, and small to medium businesses aren't sitting on rings; they're sitting on the end of spokes. So there's only one thing that needs to be dug up. I think my thought on that, and certainly the feedback we're getting from our MSP customers, is that it is hybrid, right? Some people have gotten the sticker shock of moving infrastructure intensive workloads to the cloud. Some of them have realized that actually we can get a lot more out of this hardware than we could, and a lot of those workloads also, they're not, these SMBs aren't doing Amazon for Black Friday, right? They're workload for the next year is generally quite predictable, and that's where it makes sense to buy and operate hardware yourself.
Interesting. So there's new opportunity maybe coming in this cycle, and I guess we'll just have to see what time brings with as bandwidth continues to change. I've seen bandwidth going up now, even in the 5G. Now they're talking right up to 10G. They want to skip everything in between, right? So,
it's going to double the
so I mean, I just can't fathom, like, at what speed. I have a hard enough time typing on the small keyboard and keeping up with the autocorrects and things of that nature. So those kinds of speeds are just, down at that handheld level are interesting as to what you'll be able to do and how remote we really will be able to be as long as we have stable internet or stable bandwidth, right? So one of the other things that I think is interesting, and we talked a little bit about the authorities and the role that the authorities might play with a solution such as Infrascales, but you know, insurance companies when they're going through their, a lot of the MSPs are always saying, "Yeah, we're getting asked with this questionnaire, and we used to just sign off on it. Now we're being really reluctant to sign off on things." Wanting to talk to the insurance company to make sure that we're not putting a yes, or if we're putting a yes, we give it a note that goes along with it. Where do you guys ever get into helping the MSPs with that? And what does that look like?
It's a huge driver, right? Even for our own. Like I recently did our business insurance, and like they're starting to ask increasingly detailed questions about business, well, about cybersecurity, and then I think the broader focus, which is where our industry is heading, the industry Infrascales in, which is much more about business continuity than it is just about, oh, do you have a backup solution? Do you have a disaster recovery solution, right? They're starting to look at, well, if your losses per hour are 10,000, then do you have a solution that's appropriate to that, right? Are you just using file and folder backup to protect a complicated ERP system or manufacturing system when you really need something that's got a much quicker RTO that has boot verification, these types of things? The industry's still at the point, a lot of these risks are still uncorrelated. So insurance companies are like a little more comfortable with asking questions. But I think the longer term, and I think maybe in the next 5 years, we're going to see some kind of certification for the core tools, right? Can you show that you can meet certain things, right? We have, a lot of places have a SOC 2, they'll have an ISO 27001 for their ISMS, all these other types of, 9001 for quality control, right? I think a time is gonna come where ISO certification is going to hit, particularly 27001 is going to hit a lot more businesses. And that's potentially a huge driver of business for MSPs, right? Can they, put together a suite of things that will cover, particularly, the new 2022 conditions for that. But then I think they're going to start looking at some of the more well-defined components like backup and disaster recovery and say, well, look, we're now not just going to send out a vendor questionnaire. We are going to want to see either some kind of actual certification or at least an attestation where someone else has come along and said, well, vendor XYZ has promised that they have, 2 copies of the data, one of which is air gap. They're going to want, like a BDO or a PwC or this is probably going to come out of the finance audit firms to go and actually look and say, well, yeah, I physically put eyes on not only the controls and the processes, but I saw that they have this data somewhere else, or they showed me in the cloud console that there is clear separation of these types of things. Back when I used to work in the payments industry, this is how it works for PCI, right? To really be connected to the payment networks, particularly the cards, in any meaningful manner, you need a PCI certification. And that PCI certification has to be attested. It's not just, hey, I promise I did all these things. Someone else with a different set of financial incentives is going to come in and check on it. And I think that kind of thing is going to happen more and more for what are currently sort of standards like NIST 853 or ISO 27001. That's going to sort of slowly morph into either an insurance company driven or industry driven, like, here are your baseline things that you just need to have in order to get either business insurance or cyber insurance.
Mhm. Interesting, but it's definitely, you're bringing up some key points that we always hear about the controls, and we talk about a lot of the different things that are in the certain compliances right now that are out there. But what we haven't seen is the maturity, right? And we're seeing that the technology service industry is might be facing some regulation for the first time in its existence, right? And so at first it was just like, we're going to put some wrappers around it, ISO, PIC, CMMC, and NIST and others. now we're actually hearing that there might be actually, not just data protection laws by state, but at a national or federal level of, hey, you're going to do this, or you're not going to be, or you're not going to be around. So,
Well, and actually looping back to the authorities is an interesting point there, right? So state and local governments often have, either state and local or federal regulations that they have to follow. A lot of them are obligated to follow certain frameworks, right? That has been on a best effort basis, but increasingly we've got customers reaching out to us, MSPs, who on behalf of end customers are saying, look, we need to go into the next level of detail now because there's a genuine audit happening by the state of the local government or by the state of the government agency, and now we're really being asked to pony up. So that's really a step, I think, towards the model moving much more towards attestation, is that they're coming through and auditing. At some point, I think the volume of audits is going to become too high, and they're going to turn it around. And it's the same with if you think about home insurance, right? It's a very mature market. So if you try to change your home insurance, you end up getting asked right about the same set of questions, right? And I think that's going to start happening with the cyber insurance side of things. They're going to ask the same set of questions. It'll become a standardized questionnaire, and then it'll evolve into something that really everybody needs to follow. I don't think anyone necessarily wants regulation. Like, I don't think that is not necessarily, and whether it'll be beneficial or not,
right,
particularly in the US environment.
Well, once you put it in, then you got to police it, right? And that's the side right there is,
and you've got to keep it up to date.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's, technology is moving at a pretty reasonable pace. And, thankfully this is now resolved, but when virtualization came along, I'll tell you what, there were a bunch of industry frameworks that you did not know what to do. You had this thing that was potentially increasing your security by allowing you to break down your workloads and use virtual networking, all these things. And you look at the framework and they're like, no, they're running on the same PC, so they're touching each other. It's like, well, no, they're not. Right. And, that's really one of the challenges with regulating, technology versus, like a lot of what we hear in the media about regulating technology is Facebook and Google, that they're not, the parts they're talking about regulating, they're media companies. Right. Not pure technology companies, right? Yeah, they use a lot of technology to deliver it, but no one's talking about really going in to say, how does Google deliver Google Maps? They're fundamentally interested in the search engine and the maps and some of the advertising business, not how does Google build Big Spanner? They don't really mind how that happens at all. And so what we're going to see, I think that is going to drive more MSP business. I think it's going to drive more MSP cloud business as well, because if you go to your average hyperscaler cloud's homepage or certification page, it's like you just keep hitting page down through logos of all these certifications that they've got. And I think MSPs have got a chance to piggyback on that and to deal with some of the more complicated stuff, because businesses ultimately, businesses that don't really have IT departments, which is the MSP customer base or where they're augmenting it, they're not going to be able to get those certifications on their own. They need the leverage, they need the expertise. So there's a real possibility that's the kind of the threat of regulation, or at least the insurance industry pushing regulation, is really going to help with that.
Oh, right. Sorry, I'm like Aaron. I'm recovering a little bit. I have a little cough from. I was down in Miami at DattoCon, and I got like this whole series of allergies that I didn't have in South Carolina, and it's hard to believe it's only 2 states away. But it's just the climate and what's going on down there. So, one of the things that you guys are is obviously you're a developer. You're developing a platform. You have a developed platform. What are you finding out in the market on finding people now? I mean, I heard that the job market is good. People have stabilized. People have finally, from the Great Resignation, they've kind of sat down now and put themselves in a place and said, I was wrong. I should have never done it. And, I'm back. But are you guys still struggling to find the right people or the right mix and these new ideas of how they work?
There's quite a few trends, I think, going on the employment side, right? feedback we have from some of our customers is that finding skilled folks, and MSPs are typically hiring locally, not remotely. Or like they're hiring in a state, for instance, rather than, hey, it's fine to have someone in California or someone in Iowa supporting someone in South Carolina. So in local markets, it can be quite varied. And some of these people are very tied to some of these MSPs are very tied to a geography. At the next kind of level up, at the size where we have dedicated engineering teams for each of our products, we're finding that hiring is relatively straightforward. It can take a little while, and I think the Great Resignation for quite a few companies has kind of changed the hiring model a little bit. This whole business of we'll catch up with you every 3 to 5 weeks is starting to decline. Folks are realizing, like, look, if this was a critical hire and you needed to do it in 60 days, were you really thinking 24/7 about that candidate, or did you forget about them? Right. And then be like, oh, I've got to do something. So, efficient hiring processes are one. I think tech unemployment is at a relatively low level right now, certainly at a national or global level. Then, on the other hand, like what I can tell based on my inbox, there are a lot of staffing firms out there with a ton of people on the bench. So we might be seeing a bunch of folks moving out of staffing or dedicated team into dedicated roles at companies, given that a lot of companies for whom tech is a business or who use a lot of tech, they're looking for folks, and they don't necessarily want to pick up a staffed team either on, off, or near shore. So, it's on the one hand, I think there's a shortage of people in one area, but then there really does seem to be a dearth in others. The other thing I would say is that the rate card totally changed with COVID. Right, offshore has gotten more expensive, nearshore has gotten more expensive, which really starts to advantage onshore folks, particularly in the engineering business, which is very creatively oriented and very collaboration oriented, and in the MSP business, where a lot of it's local and word of mouth and working with small to medium businesses, not necessarily going to get a referral from a manufacturing company in South Carolina to a hospital in Iowa.
No doubt. So, you guys are out there, and you're I don't want to say you're in a crowded space, but there's a lot of players in your space, right, that are out there. What do you guys do to get your word out? That's another thing that a lot of people are always struggling with. There's sessions like these that are great to broaden out and hear the knowledge that you guys have, but how do you guys get your word? Where do you go? Where do you show up at?
I think, thankfully, well, there was a period during COVID where I'm not sure anyone was really doing anything, but attending industry events, I think, is the single biggest one, and doesn't necessarily need to be like an event dedicated specifically to your industry subsector, to MSPs or to backup and disaster recovery. We're finding a lot out of cyber. We're finding a lot out of automation. We're finding a lot out of attending events where folks are going to be that are going to be interested in a broader suite of solutions. Be that attending a local government conference. You obviously have to be present with the big distributors as well. And then, the MSP, the interesting thing about the MSP business, and we're very much focused on the channel, right? We have a small direct business and we have a small consumer business, the marketing for which is, totally different and primarily focused on, kind of more on ads and cold outreach, right? It is very different selling through the channel and to the channel. And I think some of that is, trying to build a name for that. And, trying to use folks like Aaron, who have really worked in the industry for a long time, or folks like myself who come from enterprise and come from working with large companies, and try to take some of the strategies that are used there to this market space. Aaron, do you want to chip in a little bit on how we work with MSPs and how really the kind of the interchange of staff between us and some of our MSP customers has really advantaged us?
Yeah, I would actually honestly say that a lot of growth besides attending events comes from word of mouth from existing partners. I see a lot of growth from that angle. I've been on many calls where, how'd you hear about us? Well, I'm in a tech group. and one of the guys in your group talks about your support all the time, and another guy talks about your technology all the time. So that's actually one thing I see a lot happening is we see a lot of our partners becoming evangelists pretty quickly due to the support, the capabilities, the feature sets, the price that we offer, and then they just spread the word. And I think that's probably the biggest one that I've noticed, because I'm on the call with a lot of these partners a lot of the time, and so that's what I'm met with a lot. Other than, of course, going to like ConnectWise events. I think I went to another one, MSP backup convention in San Diego, like almost about a year ago, and then they had it previously in Florida that I had gone to as well. So, conventions is another good one. I think Andrew covered as well already. So those are probably the top two. I'd say get our name out there, get people to recognize us, and then again, marketing doing their thing, like pulling us into, conversations such as this that help people recognize that, oh, we've got this product out here, and we're going to be able to help the industry and work with your RMMs and your PSAs and your existing stack of other software, cybersecurity software, and we just kind of work together to make a cohesive piece. And a lot of people want to hear that and be part of that.
Tell me about your integrations. What do your integrations look like with those other platforms? What do you trade with them?
So one of the integrations we have is with ConnectWise, specifically with their RMM and PSA system. You can log in and basically assign or connect companies to your existing companies within those agreements, and then look for agreements and additions. And it's able to look at your existing stack of billing and ticketing hierarchy, how you've set up. Like maybe these clients are tier 1 and they deserve SLA of 2 hours based off of their pay level within our MSP, right? And then tickets that are created through our system will then report back to ConnectWise, and even better, things like auto closing tickets, auto amending tickets, prepending to the bottom as things change. It helps us to support our MSP partners in managing not only our products, but reducing the workload of managing tickets so they can focus on managing on the work. And then, of course, other ones like Autotask. We actually worked on Autotask for a while, and then Datto bought them up right underneath us as we were integrating with them. So we got a little bit done on that. Not as much as ConnectWise, but there's some there. On top of having a huge full stack of APIs, public APIs that you could utilize to build your own website. So basically, we have our Infrascale dashboard that you can manage everything from. But if you wanted to, you can go and integrate into an existing website that you have for acquiring new clients, promoting sales, doing upgrades, deploying as you need. So a lot of this stuff is already built out through APIs that if you have the time and you have somebody that knows REST API or even SOAP, they can really go hog wild with it. The sky's really the limit. There's a lot of other vendors that have contacted us, and because we use REST, they're able to dig in. I wish I could remember some of them, but there are some that are definitely growing. But mostly we have, besides ConnectWise, Autotask, some partners working with us. And then on the other side of things, we've got a partnership with some antivirus companies. I don't know where we're at in their standing now, so I don't want to mention names, but basically we have access to their virus definitions so that when we do our endpoint backups, we're actually to scan for known ransomware file types and check for anomalous activity based on our own technology. So we have things on top of our backup to support you with your ransomware issues, right? And then when you do get hit by ransomware, we do have that ability to have a limited versionings and quick rollback so that you can have recourse to that instead of having to pay ransomware bills. You have something you could do with it. So those are the main integrations that I would focus on.
Cool.
Yeah, what we're finding, we're part of a broader stack that MSPs are deploying, right? So we have a fantastic single pane of glass that lets you look across your entire backup landscape. But the backup landscape is part of the broader landscape, and that's why exposing some of those APIs, not just direct integrations with individual packages, but providing the data either in the form of reports or in API calls that can then be built into larger health dashboards that customers might have, that the MSPs might have for a client, so they can look at the overall status of the client, not just from the RMM tool says this. The straight out system monitoring says that, the backup says, they're going to multiple screens for that to really be able to consolidate that into a single view of a customer and be able to better prioritize those tickets coming through, not just from a pure perspective of, oh, this is a tier 1 customer, but also using some of that intelligence that we've built into the integrations to say, well, look, we'll warn you about a failed backup, but chances are it's going to resolve itself in the next 15 minutes anyway. So we're not going to set it as high priority, but we will, we'll escalate it. It starts to become more of a persistent pattern.
So where does AI play for you guys?
I'd
I
say
had to
currently-
ask. I had to ask it, right? So
Yeah, I'd say currently from what we utilize AI the most for is our pattern recognition for ransomware monitoring, right? It's a simple pattern recognition where we're basically monitoring for change rates and based off of data usage from the client. So as they're changing data, we're monitoring the change rates, what they're changing, where they're changing it, and not only to pull the blocks for the block map, the deduplication, but it's also allowing us to, keep track of what is changing, how often it's changing, where it's moving. And then as a result, we're able to create these heuristics that tell us, well, you're having an unusual amount of activity here. Here's a list of everything that's changed in the recent area. Here's where they're located. So you can actually jump in and find it. We're not just going to say, we think you've been hit by ransomware. Good luck, right? So we want to give you those breadcrumbs, maybe even a whole loaf of bread so you can start snacking on it. So you're looking for what the problem is without having to do too much legwork on your end.
So,
And I think,
go ahead.
Staying on the so maybe the theme of PSA tools, right? There's a lot of assistance that we can that we can provide to MSPs, and we actually find some folks deploying this themselves in terms of AI assisted resolution, AI assisted documentation, and one of the interesting things about disaster recovery is the training challenge, right? At best, people are doing this thing twice a year. And I mean, I can tell you, if I do something twice a year, I need a little bit of assistance. So, being more intelligent about searching the documentation, getting stuff up in front of customers. I no one wants a clipping, right? But being able to show them the relevant documentation and their own operating procedures at the right time when a disaster is going on. And also then, there's quite a bit that we do within our own operations to assist our own support staff in, rapidly diagnosing issues. It's always assistive, right? No one wants to hear, again, no one wants Clippy, and no one really wants a chatbot either, frankly, right? They want to talk to a human being, particularly when, probably the single biggest cause of folks calling support for backup and disaster recovery in general is they're in some kind of incident. And what they really want to do is to talk to someone who knows exactly what to do, not, read the quite well-written documentation, but, may or may not apply to their situation. They might have a question about, oh, we're trying to restore a VMware, image from the cloud and this and that and the other. What is your recommendation, right? So being able to have that, picked up by the AI and assist our support staff, but then also have our support staff assist the customer during what is generally a pretty stressful time, right? So there's definite applications there. And the other big area we're looking at is using some of that anomaly detection and pattern detection to better optimize storage, right? In terms of where things are located when around, retention, storage, tiering, those types of things. There's some real applications of machine learning in that area.
It's like you get into that pressure cooker situation where you want to do it and people are calling you, right? They need help and they're frustrated and they're excited. And, a lot of techs get it on the other side and get hammered because, everybody's so excited instead of just saying, hey, I know you're here, let's diffuse it. But, maybe the wireless carriers and the airlines could learn a little bit from the MSP community that has some kind of live operators and tech support, Nothing like calling JetBlue saying that they've done something and you just, caught in a loop of it's worse than the old auto attendants. It's the new AI loops are just deadly. And you're like, no, that's not what I asked. No. And you find yourself arguing with them, right?
And I think having run a big contact center business for a while, like what we discovered, certainly, well, this is pre and post ChatGPT, it's a little different, but intent detection is only half the problem, right? You can figure out what the customer wants to do. Now you've actually got to solve the problem, and a lot of folks aren't looking there. And this is one of the reasons that we still offer 24/7 live support. People, when they're calling support, it is in a stressful situation, and they want someone who's got that kind of cognitive ability to understand the problem and recommend a solution, specific to the deployment that they have, not just, in general, do X, Y, or Z, right? Searching FAQs, that's fine to present to our support staff, right? Because they may need a detail somewhere, but they've got that whole mental model in there, and they're also, interesting thing is, of course, they're accustomed to dealing with restoration and ransomware type situations. Getting back to the training problem that happens with a lot of software that you don't use very often, and backup and recovery is probably very high on that list. Like that experienced person you can reach out to, AI is not yet at that point that it's going to provide that level of assurance, and just the level of detail in some of these, the level of detail you need to consider in some of these complex restoration projects. It's not just restoring an individual item, it's restoring a whole system. So it's a real collaboration between us and the customer. And there, I think it's a really good example of where, we should be using people, but where, really where we're starting to deploy AI is on the mundane tasks that people really don't want to do, like managing retention more intelligently, right? This is something where it's, somewhere between rule and quantitative based, where, making sure that the customer's quota of space or space available on a device is being used intelligently. That's a great application of looking at and saying, well, look, based on historical data, you're going to start running out of quota. Do you want me to this, or this, or do you want to buy more quota? Because no, I've got a growing client, or have you just misconfigured something? There are really good applications for even just linear regression, not fancy machine learning in those areas.
Well, I like what I hear, because I like talking with people. I feel like, we still get more done talking to people than we do on messages back and forth, because we're only getting part of the story or sharing some of it. So, it's, let me get a quick line of text and you'll give me a quick line back, and it's not as detailed, or let me look at that. There's no calming factor that goes along with that. So I think, having that is a really important. And let's face it, what MSP, in their great technical acumen that they have, sits there and says, "Oh, I have a problem. Let me escalate right now." They like to brute force and try and figure stuff out before they get to that escalation point. So, doing FAQs, they'll go out and search, and they'll try some things. They might tweak and mess some things up worse than they had along the way. And usually some of them will stop and say, "Oh, I broke it. I should back up." But I think having that interface and that ability to get to a live person to say, "I'm really broke, and I probably broke it more." And I bet you find that most of them are pretty honest when they call you. There's probably a couple that will kind of mask it, but you can tell right away what's going on, right?
Yeah, there's an aspect where you can tell. Yeah, there's an aspect where you can tell, and there's just a flat out aspect of advice, right? They've got a few scenarios, and what they need is someone to kind of talk them through. Well, if I restore this way, I'll get here. But can you give me an idea of how long it will take?
Mm-hmm.
Right. And some of these things, that and what I call the infrequently asked questions, is like, well, I have this version of this version of this, and the other version of that. What's my best option? Right. That's not going to turn up in an FAQ, because a lot of the stuff that does, and we still have FAQs, they still make a lot of sense, because often writing an FAQ it's faster and gets the information out there better. But the thing to do is improve the product, right? Have it advise you in a particular area, but there are always going to be these gaps in that, or someone really just wanting that extra reassurance. Even going back to the JetBlue example, like they rescheduled your flight 3 times. At some point, you want to call them up and be like, "Now you go look and tell me that what I see on my phone is actually what you see on yours," because you're now no longer really trusting information. Right. The solution has been given to you because too many things have changed.
Right. Yeah, without a doubt. We're still in a people business, no matter what anybody says. We're still in a people business. So.
Yeah, I agree. I would even say that AI still forgets nuance, right? I've read countless articles about how somebody will present a problem with AI, and then they'll give them the answer, and it's not necessarily the answer they need or want, or even sometimes it's wrong. And the AI is so sure of itself that it starts to gaslight the individual that is trying to present the issue. And so I've seen this with law cases, and I've seen this with medical advice where they're like, oh, no, it's definitely a heart attack. And it's just like, well, I'm missing half these symptoms. No, it's definitely a heart attack, right? Just to put an egregious example out there. And I think sometimes we just want somebody's voice to be like, I understand what your problem is. Let's go ahead and work on this together. It's that handhold that people want. It's why you'll never get rid of the normal checkout stands, even if the retail stores want to. I don't want to self checkout. I want to have somebody walk me through this because if something is up with the price or something was varying or the thing is in the wrong spot. I want to talk to somebody about this, and I want them to have empathy with me as I go through this, because I don't need you to condescend me and be, it's this way, right? I feel like there's an old SNL sketch of the computer guy, I forgot his name, and he'd be so condescending to the individuals that would need help. He'd be like, move, and then just push him aside and do it. And Nick Burns, your computer guy, that's what it was. But I always thought it was funny but frustrating at the same time. Imagine being at the other end of that, being told that your issue isn't important enough to warrant human interaction. We're just going to push you off on this bot, right? And I don't think they're sophisticated enough to even do that, even if you could, right?
Right.
Well, and I think you hit the nail on the head there too, right? In a lot of these scenarios, there might even be a war room going on, right? If it's a more comprehensive business continuity event, you might have an internal IT team, you might have the ownership, you might have if you're an SMB, ownership is non-technical, right? If you're an SME, look, they may not have a particularly technical CIO. It might be one of many hats that person is wearing, right? If they hear, oh yeah, the MSP is on with the AI, doesn't give them the same level of confidence as the MSP has the vendor on the call. We're going to bridge them in. We're going to talk you through this situation. And what we're trying to do is keep your business running. All right. So that's an important level of commitment that we provide. And I think, other than the technical differentiators, I think that we have, which are strong, is that, we'll get in there with you. Your problem is our problem, and we're here to help you solve it.
Good. So guys, we're at the end of our hour, and kind of when you're having fun and you're having good discussion, it tends to go fast. So I've enjoyed my time with you. Where are you guys going to be? Where are you next?
In terms of product, or in terms of
like where are we going to see you out
event?
in, what event are we going to see you at?
Oh wow, that's a marketing question. I'm just an engineer. I just fix things and deploy things. I know that there's a few events that they're working on right now. Mike and Laura will kill me if I don't know these answers, and I apologize to them. They're going to watch this and be like, oh God, Aaron. But I know that we do put them on our blog, so you can see anything that we're about to do. Go to infrascale.com and go to our blog, and you can see any events that we've got coming up. You can schedule demos to make them your own events, right? If you want to do that. So there's a lot of ways to get a hold of us, and a lot of things we're about to do, and I just look forward to helping you with that.
Yeah. Expect to see us at big distributor events. Expect the unexpected. We're going to be at a few smaller events that I mentioned earlier. And you can always keep track of us on LinkedIn or through our blog, right? And follow us on LinkedIn to keep up to date with where we're going to be.
Sounds good. Well, guys, I really thank you for joining us today, and for the audience out there, every Tuesday and Thursdays from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock Eastern, we are live with new guests or repeat guests, and we'll see you next Tuesday.
Thanks,
Take care, everybody.
All right, take care.